Recording should be good. Cool. So today I think will probably be short. I always say that, or I've been saying that the last couple weeks because there's not a ton to go over in terms of anything new. Um, but then somehow we still managed to go for an hour plus. Does anybody have anything before we jump in as usual? And feel free to drop kind of questions in as we go. Share my screen. Always easier to talk to a chart. And really, I think just like listening to the charts, anyways, right now is probably optimal. Cool. Seeing if we have anything. Nothing. All right. Feel free to drop in the chat as we go. Otherwise, let's just jump right in. I'm going to run through my list. Again, like I said, nothing crazy to go over. I just remain bullish / long XRP as the core crypto position. I still believe that XLM, HBAR, Algorand, and perhaps even Ondo are going to act as beta on XRP in the sense that if XRP pumps a lot, those others, I call them suit coins, but some people call them finance coins. I just think they're coins that are compliant, regular, benefit from regulatory clarity and compliance. I know we've talked at length of this, so I don't want to drone on and sound like a broken record. But that being said, in the midterm, everything's obviously trading somewhat in line with Bitcoin, which I actually think looks like it's starting to carve out a bottom. That doesn't mean that we can't see some shakeouts. I mean, I know everybody is looking for a shakeout down to high 80s. It seems like every trader I know, everyone I know in this space is like, not afraid of this happening, but just like this is kind of the obvious, like flush all these lows, buy down here. And obviously, if something crazy happened, or quote unquote like a black swan, maybe we could go lower. Certainly, I think, and I'm not going to comment like politically, but there's been talk about the U.S. taking Gaza, and it's hard to know when um, when this administration is saying something seriously, and when they're just talking for the sake of bargaining, positioning, whatever have you. I genuinely do not have an opinion, or not an opinion. I don't have a probability on whether or not the US is going to go and take Gaza. I genuinely don't know. That could be all just, like nonsense, talking a big game, positioning, or they could be serious about it. Now, what I will say is, like, if that happens, I think that's a pretty big geopolitical event that likely creates a lot of uncertainty and instability in markets. And there's your scenario where you get that flush down below 90, or perhaps even lower, depending on the severity of entry into another country. We got a hot mic somewhere. Just mute as you come in, if you don't mind. So that's something to be aware of, and I think that's like the main kind of like potential for a black swan right now is really in crypto and just markets in general, is like the potential for escalation in Gaza, or the US getting involved in Gaza. Again, not going to comment on whether I think it's likely or not because I genuinely don't know. I am not a geopolitical expert, but obviously, if we start seeing headlines and escalation of that narrative, the market's probably going to not like that, and you're probably going to see a lot of de-risking happening. Beyond that, we just have, what is essentially coming off of a bullish move, right? A bull pull, right? You had a rejected head and shoulders that pushed us up into the inauguration. Um, you know, Big speculative push. Nothing happened that was positive for crypto in the immediate term. No strategic Bitcoin reserve or anything like that. And we've kind of reverted back down to that the week before the inauguration kind of pump level. And in the process of doing so, we set a high, a lower high, a low, and a higher low, funneling into this symmetric triangle. And then a lot of times on symmetric triangles, the intersection of the terminal point of that triangle, the terminus, ends up acting as support and or resistance. So that happens to be at pretty much exactly 95K. So as long as Bitcoin's trading above 95K and closing, dailies above 95K, I actually think that tends to be, it makes me want to lean a little bit more bullish and more likely that we break out. And this isn't like anything groundbreaking, right? Like if we're on you got a symmetric triangle, you cut it in half and you're on the top half of that triangle, you're more likely to break out of the top of it than the bottom. Now, if we start spending time down here and, we lose this kind of just, basic support level on, basic trend line and lose the 95K support level, then yeah, certainly we can start to see a breakdown. But I do think that Bitcoin's shown enough resilience here in this 90 to 94 95K region that for us to really break down in a big way and lose this level is probably going to take some form of a news-based catalyst, some form of a development. I don't necessarily foresee it happening just like with just with bleed and drift. And that's essentially what we've been seeing is bleed and drift, but it's starting to look like it's bottoming out. It was pretty aggressive selling. You had your bounce, and now we're leveling out and finding an equilibrium point, which has been between 95 and 97K. So in the immediate term, I don't necessarily have a big opinion on Bitcoin. Apart from that, like I would probably in the short term lean a little bit more bullish in terms of like getting a pop back up to this range, maybe back up to 100K. If you look in high block, we're pretty capped on either side here. Every time we take a dip down, we see a pretty large bid come in around 94, 90, just anywhere below 95. You start to see a nice bid come in. But as soon as we pop back up to 97, 98 up here, we're seeing a big ask come in, right? So my guess would be more chop in this range and eventually a move to the upside. Potential for a move to the downside would, I guess, be tax selling. But let's kind of go back and talk about tax selling just briefly. I know we cover it every week, but just want to give an update on it. Get my tax selling fractal here, daily. All right. So right now we are in a very brief hiatus from tax selling. So if you look at what happened a year ago, you had a lot of US buyers, a lot of US based ETF buyers that if they wait, right, this was the launch of the ETF, January 10th, January 11th, sell off, right? And then we got our markup from below 40K all the way up to 73K. This is where we're at right now from a year ago, where we saw this early wave of buyers has been very highly incentivized to take profits and sell. Reason being is they go from paying 40% tax to 15% capital gains tax. A lot of these buyers from about a year ago are very likely US American buyers that fall into that category of getting a long-term capital gains tax cut, or not cut, but break, going from 40 to 15%. Right now we're at February 19th, right? So you kind of see this peaked out at like February 15th and it kind of bottomed out around February 24th. So we've got like a 5, and it didn't really kick up again until February 26th, right? So we've got a 7-day break from tax selling. And then the back half of this, I do think is going to create some potential drawdown. Because I think there's a lot of buyers here that are holding on to sell. And they're, still deeply in profit. However, I think a lot more of these buyers got flushed out. I think they got flushed out in this, almost year-long, 9-10 month long chop, where we retested 52, 53. Probably had a lot of people move their stop losses up. and get taken out along the way if they were buying this last leg. So I do think there's probably less tax selling to be had in this region. And then post March 15th, we get a pretty nice long break from tax selling all the way until kind of September, October. Really, it kind of bottomed out around September, right? So this would be kind of our time frame, our typical 4-year market cycle for Bitcoin. This would be like the final move happening basically between March, essentially where we chopped last year. We would ideally be moving upwards this year. So basically between March and July, August, September, pretty decent upside. So what that potentially looks like is ideally, it could be wrong here. Ideally, this little hiatus from tax selling creates some form of a breakout to the upside, maybe another test of 100. Maybe you want to, if we get to the top of the range, that'd be ideal, right? And I actually wouldn't even mind taking a short position or selling some, taking some profits, 5-10% of exposure off the table. And then ideally we would see one last kind of higher low dip down on this tax selling, and then going into March 15th or so, be able to kind of bottom out and continue higher. So that's kind of the very rough sketch outline of my base case. So like kind of a little upside this week potentially if Bitcoin can break out here and get bullish enough. If we don't see at least a pop like 99 plus, I do get a little bit worried about, okay, the second wave of tax selling could be what takes us and flushes us below, right? Add in maybe a negative narrative or two, a negative headline or two. Maybe we do get that move down to the 80s, the high 80s, or 85 plus. So ideally, we want to see as big of a move in the next week as possible during this break of tax selling. And I think that will probably dictate, like if we can get all the way up to the top of the range at 107, 108, 109, that's really ideal. We get a pull back to 90, high 90s again, and then we're potentially off to the races. So that's kind of the framework I'm using for time frame of being, bullish or bearish. Historically, February, one of the worst months of the year, second worst month of the year, only to September, right? So you see September. I should probably update this and move this over to February, and we're kind of in a double. There, 31st February. February is generally speaking, a bad month. And you can kind of see since the inauguration, we've been drifting and bleeding downwards. But the good news is that the bleed and the correction actually has not been that bad, considering the fact that we're in February and we've just eaten the bulk of tax selling, and we had a pretty nasty speculative pump going into the inauguration, right? So all things considered, I think Bitcoin has been fairly resilient here, and it's really just a matter of holding this range. And if we lose it, recover it quickly. Ideally, we move back up to the upside. In the short term, maybe a break from tax selling allows us to kind of tap the top of the range again. That would be a really good opportunity here towards the end of this high tax selling period to take a little bit off and then try to scoop a higher low on some coins. Let me see here. All right. Is virtuals in free fall? I still have some virtuals exposure, but I haven't been charting it a lot. Let's see. They just launched. It's at 94 cents. Yeah, I mean, it looks like this fractal may be breaking down a little bit. We'll see. Ideally, I think this is a long if it ever breaks this trend line here. I think if it ever breaks this trend line around $1.50, $1.30. This base case has been kind of just chop around down here and then, eventually recover. Impulse on the 4-hour and the daily occurred around 60 cents. Around 60 cents is actually where I'd probably be inclined to even bid, despite the fact that I do have some exposure here. I do have a pretty solid moon bag. But yeah, if this pops back down to 60 cents, I'd be pretty inclined to bid. A lot of the times these impulsive moves that had a lot of demand in this region just create a lot of demand as well. But yeah, definitely hope a lot of people took profits on AI and meme coins in January. Virtuals is kind of like, unfortunately, fallen. AI in general is fallen into the category of like launchpad tokens, like meme coin launchpad tokens, which has not been ideal. But I am super bearish on meme coins. I don't think meme coins should be touched between now and probably a year plus. I think the meme coin narrative very likely peaked. I don't think meme coins will see all-time highs again. Pepe, for example, has, I'm actually like, ideally, I want a short-term Pepe pump to short it from up here on like a Head and Shoulders. I the only thing with like maybe Pepe does okay if Ethereum somehow rallies and starts leading the market, but yeah, I'm more inclined to be short Pepe, especially as we reach like late February. Like all of this tax selling is about to hit for Pepe. So if you bought Pepe back here, you're just like dying to sell at lower capital gains tax. An interesting altcoin, actually, because it has actually gone through all of its tax selling already, is INJ. Right. So INJ, I do recommend adding to your watch list. If you're a trader, or if you're just bullish on alts in general, or if you're bullish on INJ in particular, I do recommend keeping an eye on this. The reason being is like this, for one thing, it moved from $1 to $52. Like this was a 52x, and it also ran last cycle from like 70 cents to $25. Like this thing has had a propensity now to run super hard. Now, if we actually measure out 365 days, tax selling essentially called the top, right? This top was like a bearish divergence. It did go up and make a new high, right? But you could have gotten out at 40. Like if you were riding INJ, you could have gotten out on just based off of tax selling at, a tax selling fractal at $44, or a tax selling thesis at $44. Now it made a very brief bearish divergence as Bitcoin peaked at 73K. And then it was all downhill as all these people were in long-term capital gains tax. And it's, been down only really since then, with one brief push. Now, the interesting thing about INJ now is that if we go back to a year ago from today, right, there's no tax sellers. Anybody who bought up here is now underwater. If they're still holding, they probably already sold. So there's no overhang on INJ anymore. And most altcoins have their kind of, or a lot, most meme coins rather, have like, they started running big last February and early March towards the end of the Bitcoin run. Right. So they have a lot of tax selling to potentially chop through. Whereas something like INJ that started running in December of 2022, bottomed out and just started running super hard earlier than everything else, has already chopped through all of its tax selling and is now below where it was a year ago. So this is an interesting one to watch. I'm not necessarily super bullish on INJ. I've seen a little bit of, a little bit about it, seeing more activity on the chain or whatever. Nothing crazy. But if you're looking for an INJ position, honestly, I would just be looking for INJ to start trading, above $15 and outside of this kind of, downwards diagonal, right? Nothing too crazy here, right? If you were just kind of building a position on the other side of this diagonal, not the most amazing trade in the world, but 76% upside on what wasn't even a new all-time high, just a nice bounce. So I think INJ could take some time to play out here. I think it could probably chop sideways. Maybe it sees another leg down. But if we break through kind of 15, just know like you don't have to deal with tax selling, headwinds on INJ. Let me check in here. No, I do think that Doge is like maybe one of the few meme coins that has some potential, but let's check its tax selling. Let's see where we were in February. Where'd this peak? This peaked March of 2024. The only thing about this is like all these buyers got taken out already, and they're not in deep profit. So I don't really think that Dogecoin has serious tax selling either, right? You have some, yeah. I mean, you've got basically you've got a little bit of people, if they bought back here and they held on the entire time, yeah, they're in capital gains tax. They're going into cap gains. But if they were willing to hold through this, they're probably super bullish on Doge. And most of them probably got washed out. So I actually don't think tax selling is a big deal for Dogecoin. And I think it's one of like the very few meme coins that has reached escape velocity and is not necessarily tied to a lot of the extraction that we're seeing in the meme coin space. I just don't think it's any like on-chain meme coins is just they've been destroyed. And unfortunately, like it's been very negative for the AI agent space is because like AI agent tokens are also on chain, but all the on-chain liquidity is being scammed out of the space by David Portnoy and the guy who launched Trump, the Hayden, whatever his name is, from Kelsier Ventures or whatever, who made tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, on launching the Trump meme coin, the Melania meme coin, and then the Argentina meme coin. I just like been saying for a while, like I've got very little to no interest in low micro caps right now because there's just super, super extractive and super scammy. I think the market is bifurcating to two different pools of capital. One being like on-chain retail meme coins and scam coins. And I think that pool of liquidity has been shrinking rapidly, and the space has just only gotten more extractive for that pool of capital. On the other hand, I think you have institutions and some retail that is not interested in meme coins, but still interested in altcoins, and that's kind of where the Suitcoin thesis comes in, where XR the institutions and the investors, even retail investors, that are just more interested in things with utility. So I actually think the market is bifurcating between essentially like utility and regulatory compliant coins, and meme coins, and anything that's on chain right now is just like I basically falls into that meme coin category, unfortunately, which does kind of unfortunately include AI agents because they pull from the same pool of capital. I don't think Virtual's protocol is necessarily forever dead. I think they've got a very well-funded team, and I do think that that pool of capital will eventually go up. Again, if Bitcoin runs to 130, 140, 150K, we'll still see some speculation on chain. And I still think Virtual's protocol can separate themselves. The team just ships nonstop. So, yeah, I mean, you see just brutally deep corrections on this stuff when the market's kind of bleeding out like it has been. But yeah, I still hold my moon bag of Virtual's protocol just because I believe in the team long term. Speaking of XRP, Brazil, and this is, I'm going to kind of reiterate the XRP thesis. Which again, XRP is just kind of like in this weird symmetric triangle, potential for a little head and shoulders here, but you could call this maybe a deviation based on the inauguration hype. And if this deviation wasn't here, I mean, this would essentially just be an ascending triangle. As it stands, it's kind of also a symmetric triangle. So I don't have like a amazing TA read. I think XRP could break up, it could break down. I've kind of been using this fractal, this Bitcoin fractal from the August 4th capitulation in Bitcoin to kind of follow along. And it's been following roughly in line. And we're kind of like, potentially on this part right here. So if this does spill over like Bitcoin did, I would expect maybe a test down to $2. I'd be a buyer at $2. And then, choppy recovery. Ideally, we just break out from here. Ideally, this is bullish enough that it just breaks out from here and this just starts making higher lows and higher highs. Like, just because Bitcoin has a fractal that it's followed, closely, we can diverge from this fractal at any time. Above this kind of $3.10 region, actually get very, very bullish. Like above this region here, I've got some boxes drawn. Basically above here. Start closing candles up here. I think it's a pretty straightforward long. So basically anything like above 290, if it's just holding like a bunch of 4-hour candles or a couple daily candles up here, I think it's a pretty straightforward long, taking out that prior high. If not, I'm just like ready to bid roughly $2. 226 as well is an interesting spot, which is right there. That was our low after our dead cat bounce, not dead cat bounce, but our bounce. So no clear read directionally on XRP until this thing actually decides to take out 226, and then I think it's going to 2, or take out 290, and then I think it's probably going to like 4 plus. Macro still bullish, like high time frame still bullish on XRP. So XRP news today. Let me get like maybe a cleaner XRP chart. Was that XRP in the middle here? Brazil launched the first ever XRP spot ETF, and then on top of that, they launched a Brazilian real stablecoin on XRP. And this is moving along a little bit faster than I thought. So you've got, XRP, and then you've got RLUSD. Now you've got, I forget what it's called. It's like BBRL, which is, I think, is like a weird thing to call it. I think you'd call it RL maybe. I don't know. Ripple Real. Anyways, you got now a second stable coin on the XRP ledger. Now imagine, ideally, it would be awesome if like, we'll call RL or whatever. If China launched one for the Chinese yuan, maybe we could get RLJPY, right? You get all these stable coins launched on XRP, and you increase the liquidity of these stable coins, and banks and institutions start using these stable coins to transfer money across borders or for payments or for whatever. You're just injecting liquidity on the XRP ledger, and we know what happens when a lot of liquidity moves into tokens on a chain. Now, in general, like what we've seen in the past is Ethereum ran super hard when we saw a bunch of ERC20 tokens launch last cycle and NFTs launch last cycle that moved a lot of liquidity onto Ethereum. It was very beneficial for ETH. We've also seen it with Solana, with meme coins and NFTs. A lot of money moving in, a lot of liquidity moving into these meme coins on Solana was very bullish for Solana. We saw it with Virtual's protocol. Virtual protocol, the team was very smart in that they used the virtual token for liquidity for all the AI agent tokens that they launched. So all of the money that was moving to the AI agent tokens also benefited Virtual. Unfortunately, on the way down, it's also pretty negative. That being said, there's not really like a massive reason for a country, like once you've launched a stable coin on the XRP ledger, there's not really a reason to like decrease stablecoin, like take stablecoins back off the ledger, right? So this is like a flywheel that is potentially like up only in terms of liquidity moving on to the XRP. Like, yeah, there's times where stable coins you dry up and there's more tether being withdrawn or burned than minted, and same with USDC. But in general, it's been like, I'm very bullish on stablecoin growth over time, over the next decade. So I think XRP is positioned to capture a lot of that if we see this trend of stablecoins being launched on XRP and the XRP ledger continue. So XRP is just basically the liquidity pair for all of these stable coins, which I think are only going to grow and be kind of up only. So the flywheel kind of works in one direction. Now, when everybody wanted to sell their AI agent tokens, that was very negative for Virtual's protocol. So the flywheel works in both directions, but in this case, because I'm so bullish on stablecoin growth that I don't really see like these stable coins going anywhere in terms of liquidity but up over the next 5-10 years. That is essentially like the thesis for XRP, and it kind of has been for a while. But the fact that we're already seeing a second stable coin from this is the ninth largest country by GDP is Brazil. So the fact that we're already seeing like a top 10 country move into pushing stablecoins onto XRP Ledger this fast after RLUSD just launched, I think is super bullish. I'd love to see Japanese yen. Obviously, the second largest economy in the world is China. I don't know if that's like geopolitically possible or likely, but would be awesome to see. And I'd love to see other countries launch as well. But the more stable coins that are launched in various countries on the XRP ledger, like the more bullish, because now all of a sudden, like you just have a very rich, fast, low fee FX market, all driving liquidity to XRP. That's what excites me about XRP, and I actually think that's the kind of news that broke today, is that this is kind of moving a little bit faster than what I even thought it was going to be, the pace it was going to be moving at. So like XRP is up 4 or 5% on this news. I think it's news related. You also had Donald Trump tweet about, or Truth Social about some Ripple stuff, 2 Ripple articles, which is also bullish. But I think in general, like just the fact that more and more stablecoins are launching already on XRP Ledger has people bullish. Now, in the meantime, like I don't think the market's in a point, like Bitcoin's not at a point where, it's just been chopping, right? It's up 0.7% today. It's not bullish enough for alts to really run super hard. But if we see another leg up for Bitcoin, I expect XRP's leg up to be very violent, right? I think, once Bitcoin leaves the station, moves to 120, 130, 140K, you have a lot of people probably moving into XRP and pushing it up. Yes, Eden Layer still planning to launch either late February or early March. And I actually think that what they're doing with AI agents is potentially very interesting and different from what the market is currently seen so far. All right. As far as like alts go, like I actually still think like I'm still like the base case is that alt season is like very close or has already begun. And when I mean already begun, like I said last week, this doesn't feel like alt season has begun, right? When alts have, this is total 3 divided by Bitcoin, right? So this is everything except for ETH divided by Bitcoin, altcoins essentially. Like when you're here, like you don't feel like, this feels like the dead opposite of alt season because alts are so far down against Bitcoin, right? But really alt season's already begun. We've already, like, this was the low and alts ripped from here. Even if like you kind of had like an interim alt season, even if like you caught this low, yes, we did end up going lower, but alts against Bitcoin in this period of time still ripped 84%. When you have a huge liquidation in alts against Bitcoin, like we did here, and we bounce back and we've kind of broken this trend and we've gotten like this big wedge going on, right? And the chart's trying to bottom out. I think it's like very reasonable here to be positioning for an alt season. Obviously there's risk in being in alts when they've been kind of this weak in recent time, but remember, like this was the election. We saw a huge push. We kind of got our second top around the inauguration. Now we capitulated all the way. Like we fully retraced. Like alts, people talk about like retracing the Trump pump post election Trump pump in Bitcoin. Like I don't necessarily think that is super likely to happen. Like I don't necessarily see Bitcoin coming all the way back down to 70K. Possible if we get like a bad headline, some bad news or black swan, whatever. But ultimately, like we already saw the Trump pump get retraced fully in terms of altcoin dominance or total 3 divided by Bitcoin. Now it's trying to like make a higher low here. It's made one higher low. It's trying to make a higher low, and if this thing can chop upwards over the next couple of months or next couple of weeks, I think we can get a breakout and a pretty strong alt season. I know CVO, for anyone who watches his channel or in the videos he puts out, he's of a like mind. He thinks alt season is gonna like really start ripping in mid to late March. And I tend to agree. I think it could be choppy and slow until we get through this Bitcoin tax selling, which really ends around March 17th. So we're in line on the date. Tax selling on Bitcoin ends where it, peaked last year. I think it was March 13th to 17th. Anyway, mid to late March. And then I think we're off to the races. So when I'm calling for alt season here, all I'm really saying is like, I think the low is in for alts against Bitcoin. Maybe we get one or two more flushes, but if you can just be in spot and survive, I really think there's a lot of upside on the other side of February, particularly for alts that are super beat up, with the exception of meme coins. I just don't want to touch meme coins. Now, if Pepe falls, if Pepe falls another 70% and we get through all that tax selling, then maybe I'll pick some Pepe up or something, but not at current prices. Cool. All right. Then otherwise, like as far as just like good looking charts, Litecoin and Monero, which are again like not the most flashy cool altcoins, but your flashy popular altcoins have been getting crushed, like meme coins. The popular coins on crypto Twitter have been getting just destroyed. Like any meme coins on crypto Twitter just, oh, it's just crypto Twitter right now is kind of in shambles. And I even I question the strength of Hyperliquid. I'm definitely not buying here. I'm not shorting either, but I would be very cautious to be in Hyperliquid because I think it's got a big premium on it, based on big accounts shilling it. Now we get into like a proper alt season, then yeah, I think it could be a big momentum play and maybe go to $50-$70 or something. But until then, I'm skeptical. I think if we get another flush out, Hyperliquid could be particularly a particularly bad flush. I'm not trying to FUD Hyperliquid. I actually think it's a good product and has its place, but I think it's trading at a probably 30-40% premium just based on how popular it is on Twitter, among some large accounts. But Litecoin here, huge, massive range all the way back from April of 2022 that we've now broken out of and held support on. And now we're sitting in, what is essentially a little bit sloppy of one, but essentially a bull flag. Litecoin's getting an ETF. Yeah, I know we're at the top of the range here, so obviously, not necessarily the best time to go in long, Litecoin. Unless we get a nice clean break, you could play the breakout trade, which is a little bit tougher of a trade. Have to have a tight invalidation. We got a little fake out earlier today. Otherwise, you're looking at the bottom of the range here. You're looking at, if you long here and then it comes back down to 100 on another flush, I think it's a buy at 100, right? Just like I think XRP is a buy at $2. So, that would be a 20% drop. So if you're leverage longing this, you're in rough shape, right? If this drops to $100, but I think this is a pretty clear buy at 100. I would definitely set alerts if you don't have exposure to Litecoin and you like the chart here. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the chart's super strong. Same thing with Monero. I actually like Monero a lot here. Now it is in a bit of it's kind of in this like grindy upwards pattern towards the top of its range. It's an ascending triangle. Sometimes it can be bullish, sometimes it can be bearish. But more importantly, on the high time frame chart, we have this massive, massive range that has finally been broken. And now we spent enough time above it and held it as support enough times for I think the market to get pretty bullish on it. And it's never super, when you break out of a range, sometimes it just goes crazy, right? Like XRP did from 70 cents all the way up to $3 or wherever it peaked. I think it like peaked at 290 early on, shortly after the election. But you can see, Monero here last cycle. I mean, it just had a grind. It grinded up. It wasn't the top performer, but it moved 400%. Yeah, there were other more flashy things to buy last cycle, but you could buy your range breakout with spot Monero last cycle, and even if you caught it here, I mean, you're talking about 300% of a move. So I'm a big fan of like buying these range. You saw, in the 2016, 2017 cycle was a little bit more violent. Ideally, hopefully we'll get a big cycle like that this time, but no guarantees. Just very straightforward consolidation sideways. It's breaking out of a range. And it's like, you have all these altcoins right now. Think about how different of a picture this is painting for you than meme coins right now. Like, meme coins have, are essentially like here, right? Meme coins have run up, and maybe they're here, but they've just capitulated super up. Maybe they're here. Like meme coins, like a lot of them, like best case scenario, you're probably going to get a dead cat bounce. Second best case scenario, they're just going to chop sideways for a long period of time. But like, this is just a totally different chart. This is breaking out of a range, and it's at highs, like local high. Like, this is the highest Monero's traded at for the last 1,000 days. Monero has not been this expensive or this high for 1,027 days. That is very different than like the discounts or the price discounts and how low we are seeing like meme coins trading at, which is just, they're trending downwards. They're in like this stage of capitulation. So to me, this is like like I said, like the market's bifurcating. Is Monero going to give you a 10x, like a meme coin is if you catch a runner? Is it going to give you a 10x overnight? No. But the chart, in my opinion, is, and there's risk here, like something, this doesn't, this could certainly roll over, and this could be a deviation, and we could go back into the range. That's entirely possible. I don't think it's likely. I think this chart is telling us that this thing wants to go up, and I want to be long Monero. So I built a Monero position in here. I don't have the most amazing entry point either. I'm not leverage trading it. I'm just, I think I've entered at like 218 or something, higher than what I would ideally have liked to enter at. But, in profit, I'm willing to hold through some shakeouts. And if we're anywhere close to like where we were back here, there might be some shakeouts, but I want to hold for a run up to, potentially $400-500, and this thing breaks out of this huge range without taking another step down, and it just breaks out here. I mean, you're talking about, very, very high targets. The other thing with Monero is, I know the privacy coin narrative has really not taken off in a long time. Underperformed last cycle, made the big double top, ranged forever, really hasn't taken off in a big way yet. But I think if we do get any sort of privacy coin narrative, like Monero is probably going to absorb most of the liquidity, because like if you actually have a reason to use a privacy coin, you want the one with the most liquidity, right? So if you think like all these meme coin scammers are going to have to like hide, like if any meme coin scammers get prosecuted, which is entirely possible. Like I'm seeing people post like cases, like lawyers talking about like the fact that Dave Portnoy has probably committed wire fraud with these meme coins that he launched and pumped and dumped, right? Saying that he's not going to sell and then immediately full stack sells. Or if you believe that some fraud is going to get rooted out and prosecuted from, the Doge, Elon and the Doge investigations, right? Like if they find fraud and like people actually get prosecuted, where's a lot of that money going to go? I think it's going to just jam. Like if you're somebody that's worried about getting prosecuted for fraud, if you've committed fraud and you're worried, where are you going to hide the money? Monero, probably. And are you going to buy Zcash or Pirate Coin or one of these other privacy coins? Probably not. Why? Because they don't have as good liquidity as Monero. So Monero has the potential to pretty much absorb the bulk of any inflows into a privacy narrative, in my opinion. So, actually, I think there's a potential narrative there that's brewing. Um, do I think XLM still has a chance of being used for Tesla payments? Less likely now than I did, because there was like this tweet about there was this tweet from Elon that got immediately deleted, and it was about like buying the XRP dip or something. If you ask Grok, like, did Elon tweet about XRP? Grok will tell you. Grok's the AI in Twitter or X. Grok will tell you, yes, Elon tweeted about buying the dip on XRP, but then it was quickly deleted. So the fact that he tweeted that, and then like I don't know, maybe he has like somebody that immediately reviews all of his tweets and like deletes them, because he got into some trouble with the SEC around tweeting about Tesla stock years back. So maybe it just got immediately deleted by whoever like reviews his tweets, or maybe he just had, felt like deleting it himself. I think it's still possible for XLM. But the thing about XLM is I think it's just backstopped by it trades as beta on XRP. So I'm bullish on XRP. XLM usually, when XRP pumps, XLM usually pumps. So I still have some spot XLM. Not trying to leverage trade it. But it is possible. There's still connections there that can be drawn between the founder of XLM and Elon and SpaceX. But I actually think it's probably more likely to be XRP. Also, just the proximity that they all have to Trump. Brad Garlinghouse has met with Trump now, I think twice. Definitely at least once, but I think he met twice. And then he met with JD Vance. Elon obviously being close to Trump. Trump retruthing 2 XRP articles last night or the night before, or whenever it was. I think it was last night. Seems like XRP could be, again, like, we're speculating here, right? Like, there's no, it could be nothing, but also like I don't see Trump retruthing articles about Aptos or Polkadot, or you know what I mean. So while it's not like super hard evidence, and that Brad Garlinghouse and Trump or the Trump admin have struck a deal, or they're all working together, it is small little individual pieces of evidence, and have to be careful not to give those little tiny pieces of evidence more weight than they deserve. But I also like don't want to totally ignore the fact that like Brad Garlinghouse met with Trump. Trump's retweeting or retruthing XRP articles. Yeah, it's just like there's a fine line between like full on tinfoil hat conspiracy and like connecting some reasonable dots. So I wouldn't be surprised if XRP is slides in there and does get used for X pay, not Tesla payments. It would be X payments. Still hold my Tesla, by the way. I think Tesla is still a good exposure to human robotics, but probably on a much longer time horizon. I say much longer, maybe a couple years. Still, I also bought some AMD. And I'll just kind of explain. I always say we're gonna be short, and then I end up droning on and on. Yeah, so AMD really just more of a technical trade. I have no fundamental reason to buy AMD, right? I'm not particularly bullish on it fundamentally, but more of a technical trade here. So I've got my risk reward levels and just drew this box between basically 97 and 111. So if this comes down to 97, I'd probably want to buy it down here towards the bottom. So I just kind of fired my first, buy at 114, 113 as it came into this region. And then if you also throw on some short and long, margin pressure levels, nothing too crazy here. From our high and our low, you just get like a really nice confluence in this level. So if I want to draw another box, like you just have a lot of support in this region. Now, AMD's been in a pretty big sell-off. Like there's been essentially no relief for a while. So in one sense, yes, you're buying a pretty aggressive downtrend if you're buying here in the short term. I say like downtrend, technically speaking. This is still trying to make a higher low, right? So it's still technically from a high time frame perspective in an uptrend, and this would be keep the uptrend intact. But in the short term, it's in a pretty aggressive downtrend on the 3-day, which does mean that it's overdue for a bounce here. So I'm happy to if I could catch a bounce here, cut some at like 150 or so with this 2x short margin pressure level. If I could cut some between 140 and 150, and then have a moon bag of AMD off of a trade from 100 to 150, I'd be pretty pumped. Otherwise, I'll probably just buy down at 100 and then look to get out on any sort of one of these bounces, and then just kind of take my profits and run. But I think this is very overextended to the downside in the short term, and very likely to give a bounce somewhere in this region over the next couple of months. Of course, could be wrong, but I feel like there's enough technical analysis confluence there to warrant a long trade on AMD. 100 would be like, I'd probably, if we get another move down to 100, that's a big psychological level. I'd probably fire off like a pretty substantial buy here at 100 and look for, just be patient here. That'd be down towards the bottom of the range. 97 is that risk reward level. Have some structural support and resistance around 100 as well. So if this does see one more leg down, it'd be painful. Like what's that, down 10% or so from 10, 11, 12% if it falls down to, $100 from 114. But I'd fire a second bid that would be bigger than the first, size up, and look to either, de-risk at 114 and just keep, sell what I break even on the first buy and ride the buys from 100 higher, or depending if it's trading strong enough, look to just ride everything back up to like 140, 150. But I do feel like I feel like a pretty high confidence from a TA perspective that this should give a bounce between 100 and 115, right? And ideally, we'd get back up to this range between 140 and 150. So purely technical trade here. And if I'm wrong, then it probably does something like this, cut down here if it floats down to like, 93 or something, and just eat a 20% loss on the spot position. Gold, silver looking strong. Silver, still very bullish on gold, still very bullish on silver. I think gold potentially has like 1 or 2 weeks left in this trend. Probably 1 or 2 weeks left in this trend. Could put a top in here around 2,900. This is one of the strongest charts there is. You just look at like all the, look at all they're yellow on my screen, on my settings, but these are green bullish candles. These are up candles. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's so few weekly down candles, red candles, that like you can count them. It's just not a lot, and they're just very small. And any big ones got immediately reversed. So very, very bullish gold, both fundamentally, chart wise as well. A lot of narratives brewing around gold shortages, which I think is very bullish. They want to audit Fort Knox, which is wild that it's not audited, but people are talking about like, what if the gold is not in Fort Knox? People say that'd be bullish for Bitcoin. I think it'd be extraordinarily bullish for gold. If If there was more gold in Fort Knox than what was reported, I think that'd be super bullish for gold. Like everything, like if you ask ChatGPT, like I gave it a scenario. I think I posted that. I might have posted this on Twitter. Like the US government's pretty much between a rock and a hard place, like it was in the late 70s, where they either have to choose austerity, which means like cutting a ton of government spending, which they're trying to do. Tariffs, which do lead to higher prices, right? But you raise more revenue and close the deficit. And that kind of restores some faith to the bond market. And then you have to hike rates, like hike the Fed funds rate, like Volcker did up to 20% in 1979 or 80. Well, look at what gold and silver did in 1980. We've got the chart up here. On the weekly. Oh, gotta go back further. Absolutely absurd, like vertical parabolic blow off top in gold. Same thing with silver in 1980. Go back here. Absurd, like silver, just absurd blow off top. Like as big of a squeeze as you can imagine. I've said this before, but this is the equivalent, like adjusted for inflation. This is the equivalent, this $50 silver price is the equivalent of silver today trading around $800, $600 to $800, adjusted for inflation. This is just went extremely vertical when Volcker raised rates to 20%. So that is one option that the US government has, austerity. So what performs well during austerity? Gold and silver, right? Because basically all other markets crash. You're pretty much saying you're going into a recession. You're slowing down growth. You're making houses unaffordable because rates are so high, but you're restoring faith in the US dollar and faith in the bond market. The other option is to inflate away the debt. And what does well during inflation? Gold. Gold, because it's a hedge against inflation. Silver, because it's finite, hedge against inflation. So essentially, regardless of what happens, short of just like a perfect Goldilocks landing of the plane by the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve, which even then, like, it's just not realistic. Like the situation where gold and silver do poorly is zero interest rates, which is like what we saw post COVID and around COVID, like 2019, 2020. And interest rates are like they've said, they're never going back down to 0%, or not for a very, very long period of time. So the likelihood that we see 0% interest rates anytime soon is just wild. Like I think gold and silver are just the most obvious trades because we're the only scenario in which they do poorly. We're coming out of from 2020, 2019 to 2021, zero interest rates, environment. So we're not going to see that again. So like I think downside in precious metals is extremely limited, and the two scenarios that are most likely, hyperinflation or austerity, or even something in between where they just hold rates elevated for a period of time. It's bullish for both gold and silver. So I know I've droned on and on and on and on and on over the last months, and it feels like over probably years now at this point in these meetings about gold and silver, but like it shows in the charts. And it really, when crypto is not doing great, and it really helps to see that plus 1% gold almost every other day now in the portfolio. It's really offset quite a lot of downside. I know we're not political, but thoughts on what is happening with Doge, effects on the market? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind talking about political stuff when it affects the markets. The reason I try to avoid political stuff in general, in which obviously this was an election year, so we had to talk like a ton about the election and probability of who was going to win the election, and we talked a lot of politics this past year because it obviously is a big election year, and that greatly affected the markets. I'm glad like we pretty much got it right, with the exception of a few, one asset, Trump token, the meme coin performing poorly versus, but we caught Tesla, we caught the Doge pump, we caught the XRP pump, all in the wake of the November 5th election results. So I don't mind talking politics. The important thing to remember is like we're just never all gonna agree. Like we all have different political views, and we're never gonna agree on what is right or wrong from the leaders and administration. So I generally try to stay away. Like I try to stay as unbiased as possible, but obviously that's difficult when you're just talking political stuff. But um, yeah, I think again, just trying to not get, whether you think it's right or wrong or the methods with which it's happening is legal or illegal or good or bad. And apart from the implications that it has, potentially bringing somebody that, that is unelected in to do, cut government spending. Apart from like all that, I think it's like a very good thing to cut wasteful spending from the government. Now, I get that there's like a lot of like what one person thinks is wasteful spending and what another person thinks is wasteful spending can be very different. And, one person might think something is wasteful and another person might think it's very well used. And then, having somebody who's unelected be the arbiter of that or be the decider of what's wasteful and what's not and be the person that, cuts it or not. I get where that can bother a lot of people. I really do. But in general, like I think it's very healthy for the economy to cut wasteful spending, assuming the spending that you're cutting is indeed wasteful spending. I think that's a very, very good, like something that the economy's needed for a very long time. It's just like, when the economy's in a downturn or you're whatever your budget inflation makes your budget tight, monthly budget tight, like what's the first thing you do? You go and cut the trips to whatever, you go through your budget and you cut the fluff, you cut the stuff that is not super necessary, that's a little bit wasteful, whether it's like shopping on Amazon to exceedingly much or going on big trips or whatever it is, like the stuff that is not a need to have, you cut that. And that is essentially called austerity. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. And I think like balancing the budget or closing the deficit is something that is greatly needed to avoid the collapse of the US dollar as a reserve currency. um, the acceleration with which we've seen the issuance of debt is insane, very insane, and not sustainable. Um, and I think the path that is very likely is probably just going to be like a mixed bag of some like inflationary things thrown in, but there's going to be some austerity. And for anybody who like read the thing that I posted in the, I highly recommend following good. His Twitter name is Good Alexander. He's just like a very brilliant thinker. It doesn't mean that he's going to be right about everything, but he's kind of he thinks in a very independent way, and he thinks about like in a deep way about the implications of what's happening within crypto, within technology, especially in AI. He's like huge on AI and geopolitically what's happening. And something that he brought up was that essentially this partnership between Trump and Elon. Again, it's like this is just his speculation that I'm repeating, like whether you think it's right or wrong. You saw kind of like last administration, like both parties, like with good reason, like they want to be able to control the media and they want to be able to control narratives. It's like very important if you're a politician, or a person that's in power. It's like very advantageous to be able to control narratives and control what gets put out in media. So like Elon buying X and then having the ability to tailor whether you want to call it free speech or whatever, but have a place where that admittedly leans more right and is more pro-Trump than a lot of other social media platforms. More pro-Trump and more right-wing than a lot of news publications like CNN or whatever. So you kind of saw like traditional legacy media, quote unquote, like mainstream media, lean super left, and now you're kind of seeing the same um, play, I think, and this is again something that was brought up by Good Alexander that I actually think makes a lot of sense, is that this partnership between Trump and Elon just feels like a consolidation of media, control, and essentially gives them the like Elon has X, Trump has Truth Social, so they now have some ability to control narratives, whether you think they're doing that or not, whether you think X is fully free speech or not. At the end of the day, like Elon owns it. So yeah, I think it's an interesting point. But the point where he was kind of driving that is he believes the most likely case outcome is austerity. He thinks that it's going to be tough to get back on track, and it's going to be very, very important to be able to control morale and control the narrative through X and through Truth Social and through the media, to get people on board with what they're trying to do. Get people to be okay with massive budget cuts, massive spending cuts, because I think the Doge spending target, their target for cutting spending is 2 trillion. And I think they've only cut like 50 billion so far. Like when you start cutting 2 trillion, we're just kind of talking about like what are the trade-offs? Like some government spending is wasteful and a lot of people probably think is very well placed. When you start cutting 2 trillion in government spending, you're going to piss some people off. It's probably difficult to cut 2 trillion without cutting some things that are like some really nice to haves. But at the same time, like if that's what it takes to balance the budget, you have to, it's like one of those things, like if you're balancing your own personal budget and times are tough and you've got a lot of credit card debt, which is essentially an analogy for the situation that I believe the US government's in, you got to cut out some stuff. Potentially, you might have to not go on vacation this year. You might have to like cut out some really fun stuff. You might have to go to less shows, less concert, whatever your guilty spending pleasure is. You might have to cut it. And I think like what he was trying to get across was like controlling the narrative and controlling morale and getting people to be kind of okay with austerity, is kind of what this media play potentially is. So highly recommend going and watching his video and reading that. It's at Good Alexander on Twitter. I posted it in my research. He's actually like extraordinarily bullish on XRP too. He's building a project on XRP, for AI transfers of money, AI agent payments essentially. But he believes that crypto is going to be a release valve, for ultra high net worth individuals to not get caught in the next big crash. So austerity is essentially creating a recession, in order to keep the debt markets under control, the bond markets under control, stocks crash. That's kind of his base case. But there has to be a very liquid place for wealthy individuals to store their money and store their wealth. And he thinks that crypto could be that release valve and that BlackRock's kind of positioning it to be that release valve. We're already seeing gold and silver go up dramatically, because they're among the most liquid, particularly gold, like $20 trillion asset class. It's among the most liquid assets you can buy. That's easy to move money in and out of. Now, when you start talking about like moving money across borders, that's where Bitcoin is kind of even more beneficial than gold. So like, buying a gold ETF, things get really hairy and really weird. You potentially even prefer Bitcoin because you can just move it across borders very, very easily. And he also thinks that XRP is going to be very important in that regard. But yeah, it's if nothing else, and I know we're going over time here. If nothing else, I think the my big position, rather than trying to predict a specific outcome, and I kind of lean in agreement with Good. Well, his name is Alexander Good. I kind of lean in agreement with him. I do think that there's going to be some level of austerity. I think they're going to try to offset with that with some printing. They're trying to raise the debt ceiling by like $4 trillion. So I think they're going to try to like kind of skate a fine line for a while. They're talking about potentially refunding, $5,000 per taxpayer, which again, they're trying to create this narrative where like, oh yeah, cut government spending if you're going to give me $5,000, if you're going to give me 20%. So like the idea is to give 20% of the tax or 20% of the savings from cutting wasteful government spending, essentially 20% of that 2 trillion, in the form of like essentially stimulus checks or tax rebates, to taxpayers. So it's another one of those things of like, all right, we're gonna have to cut a lot of stuff out of the budget, but here's $5,000 per person to really, and that would be very stimulating to the economy to just give every taxpayer $5,000, which would probably pop markets back up. So there's tools for them to kind of skate both ways and to kind of manage this. But I think it's a sticky problem. I think but the prevailing thought here is that uncertainty is increasing. And I think that's really what is a large part driving a lot of flows into gold is like, if you're somebody who's a very high net worth individual, like you don't know exactly how this is going to shake out. You don't know if we're going to get austerity. You don't know if we're going to get higher rates. If inflation starts going up again, we had a hot inflation print last month, like 2 weeks ago now. I actually think inflation is going to cool off again. I think that was kind of a blip. But if inflation starts going up again, that's problematic. Maybe the Fed hikes rates. There's so much uncertainty with how this is going to resolve. I think playing like looking at the assets that do well during uncertainty, that's where you probably want to be. What does well under uncertainty? Not meme coins. It's like gold and high liquidity assets that high net worth individuals can use to store wealth. So that's gold. It's Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I think, is in the middle of trying to cross a chasm between being a gold-like store of value and being a correlated to tech stocks. I think it's kind of halfway in between right now. It doesn't really have an identity quite yet, but I think BlackRock's been trying to position it as a gold-like store of value. But the one thing that I am certain of is uncertainty increasing, right? As contrary as that is, I think more and more people it's very difficult to see how all of this is going to shake out. And whether you like him or dislike him, you do have somebody that is historically pretty erratic, in the White House right now. What I mean by erratic is, for example, the comments on Gaza even caught a lot of like right-wing people relatively off guard. So you kind of have somebody that can posture and position and say some crazy things. And that level of uncertainty is very uncomfortable, for, if you're wanting to allocate to certain markets. You've got inflation going up, but Trump wants lower rates. Okay, well, traditionally to address inflation going up, you raise rates. And the Fed Jerome Powell is being very sluggish and, not wanting to cut rates just yet. So that juxtaposition, that butting of heads creates a lot of uncertainty. And what does well during uncertainty? Like gold. And that's why gold is essentially going vertical right now, or starting to go vertical. It's like, that's why gold has done so well, in the short term. Like, you kind of saw this big gold cool off after Trump won the election. And that's predominantly because Trump and tariffs in general drive DXY up, dollar. It's just good for dollar strength. But now that the DXY looks like it's kind of topped out, and some of these tariffs news has kind of circulated and percolated through the markets, gold is like right back, as the play for uncertainty. So yeah, I don't know if that was a good answer. I think the answer is like, it's really a difficult, uncertain situation, and kind of coming to terms with that and being okay with the future being uncertain, just kind of leads you to like be able to invest in assets that do well during uncertainty. And there's other things that we can be a little bit more certain about. Like we know that this is an administration that has spoken very highly of crypto and is pro crypto and wants to work on crypto clarity and regulation, which I do think is good for certain assets in the crypto market. So there's still certain markets in certain places where we can place bets and benefit from some level of certainty that we have been given in the market. Um, but yeah, my general like the bulk of my portfolio, like the bulk of my net worth is gold, silver, XRP, and stable coins. I mean, like, yeah, I've got some XLM. Yeah, I've got a Virtuals protocol. Yeah, I've got a long position in AMD. Yeah, I've got like a variety of little like, long positions here and there in different things. I might open up a short hedge here and there to if I think the market's gonna go down. But the vast majority of the bulk of my positioning is gold, silver, XRP. XRP is like, we kind of explained the thesis earlier. I think it's fine to have Bitcoin in the portfolio. I've just never been the biggest, Bitcoin person, but I think it's fine. I think Bitcoin's well positioned. But if there's anything that like makes me feel more comfortable is like being pretty heavy gold and silver. And I know like a lot of people get caught up in this idea of like, I want to make a lot of money in a short period of time, but there are times to make a lot of money in crypto. I think right now it's, we're potentially, hopefully on the verge of that. We're potentially on the verge of, alt season. I still want all that exposure to some suit coins, and predominantly XRP, but, have the ability to hopefully make a lot of money in crypto, but also like don't underwrite the idea that, or underestimate the idea that gold and silver can move. In looking at the chart that's on the screen right now, like gold and silver can move very, 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 very aggressively when the time comes. And in the meantime, I do think that the downside in both of those are very limited. So I think they just make a very strong backbone to any portfolio. Now, in the short term, yeah, gold's a little bit overbought, and maybe getting a correction would be ideal, but we've been building these gold and silver positions for a while now. Cool. We'll probably round it out there unless anyone has any other questions. I always say it's going to be a brief one, but end up going on for longer. Actually, it looks like Bitcoin's doing pretty well. Oh, 272 on XRP. It's actually pretty ideal. It's like looking pretty decent here. Would love to see, like, ideally we see a pop like what I've just drawn out here. I want to see a pop above 290, right? High or low into 290, and then I actually think like this gets pretty attractive to be long. But yeah, I think a lot of people potentially sleeping on like this idea. Like Brazil just launched a stable coin on Ripple. Like that's a big deal. It would be interesting to see if Brazil launched the ETF, launched a stable coin on Ripple. It'd be very interesting if they followed it up with some sort of strategic reserve of XRP. That would be super bullish. I want to see additionally more countries launch stable coins on XRP, and I think like that liquidity thesis starts to make a lot of sense. So that was a really, really nice piece of news today to see today, and I'm glad the market's reacting to it pretty positively. All right. If nothing else, we'll wrap it up there. I hope everyone has a great evening, great rest of your week. Ping me if you need me. Overall, I think just the next couple of weeks are going to be like, don't be surprised if we get, ideally things just go up from here. But also like, don't be surprised if even in like some stuff that we're more bullish on that we get some chop, like some pullbacks. And again, like that $2, like I don't want to see XRP go to $2. Like I really don't, but I'll kind of just force myself to buy some at $2 if we do, and just, grit my teeth through it. There's, a big level at $1.40. If it goes down to $1.40, we've got to kind of reassess the overall strength of the market as a whole, because that would be pretty weak, and we got to potentially talk about buying at 140 and then selling at $2 to kind of catch a bounce and then de-risk from there. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think like $2 should likely hold if we see that level. But in the meantime, in the next couple of weeks, like the weather, my weather report is kind of like some choppiness. And then I'm in agreement with CVO, like kind of mid to late March, hopefully we really start to see some moves, and some shorter term pumps. If the market's kind of, trying to move, a lot of times the market will kind of like move earlier than what you think. Like, so ideally it would move in advance of that, and we'd just start to see some upside here in the short term in this like break we're getting from tax selling on Bitcoin. That would be awesome if we get like 99 to 105, 106K Bitcoin in the next week, and then set a higher low off of that last wave of tax selling. But all right, everyone hang in there for the next couple weeks, and I think hopefully we'll have some solid moves on the other side of February. All right. Peace, everyone.